Just a note that we are going to try live streaming this. It's going to be more of an interactive class, but there are a few people who like to try and join us for adult ed following worship. The camera is right there. So if you don't want to be on camera the whole time, you may want to sit kind of back in this section. If you don't mind, then just sit wherever. But I do want to give that disclaimer. Welcome to our new Lenten adult education class called Catching Our Breath. I'm going to introduce our teacher for us and tell you a little bit about her. And she's going to tell you more about the class itself because I have to run off and start here. So I'll be back with us next week, and I'm sad to be missing this. But Dale Selover is a pastor. She's a spiritual director and a retreat leader with decades of experience under her belt, and so you're in for a treat. She's the director of the House Next Door, which is a ministry of Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Princeton Junction, if you've heard of that church. There she provides spiritual direction and retreat ministry. She received her spiritual training, her training as a spiritual director through Oasis Ministries for spiritual direction. As I said, she's been leading retreats and doing group and individual spiritual direction for many years. And she has also been a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, where she's served many different churches. She lives in New Jersey, not far from us, East Brunswick? Princeton Junction. Oh, even closer. And she is married to another pastor, clergy couple, power couple, crazy couple, lives of service for sure. And they have 2 daughters, Sarah and Hannah. So I'm going to pray for us as you guys get started, and then I'll hand it off to her. Join me in prayer. Well, Holy Spirit, I invite you to come and be here as we've been talking about and thinking about the Holy Spirit in worship this morning. I'm just reminded of and so grateful for the ways that you transcend boundaries, that you're able to come and be powerfully present here in this room with these individuals, with this group, and also downstairs with our kids and in the adult education room with the Start Here class. And that's just such a beautiful mystery and such a gift to each and every one of us. I pray this Lenten season that this class would be a real gift to our church community, that we would find ourselves able to slow down and catch our breaths and interact and engage with you in new ways. I pray your blessing over Pastor Dale as she teaches and leads us. It's in your name that I pray. Amen.
Being a Lutheran, loved the liturgy. But probably about 20 years ago, I was on parenting leave with our 2 girls. My husband, Peter, we were attending a church where Peter was the pastor. And I was in the back pew, as one tends to do with little children. And I remember sitting there and going, you know, this isn't enough. I love the church. I love the liturgy. My husband happens to be my favorite preacher, so it was nothing about the preaching. But I was really starting to feel hungry for something more, for something deeper. And so that noticing of that hunger within me 20-some years ago led me on this journey of how could I go deeper. And so I started taking classes, and I heard about this thing called spiritual direction, and I got myself a spiritual director. And one thing led to the next, because, you know, what happens when you notice something about yourself? You start noticing it in other people, right? And so as I'm aware of my own hunger, I'm talking to moms in the parking lot at school, right? I'm standing gathered with people in the shop, right? And I'm hearing this hunger in everybody that I'm speaking. I don't know if they knew it was a hunger for God, but I knew it. And I started feeling an invitation to offer something else, different than what I was typically offering as a traditional parish pastor. So I started leading retreats, started being a spiritual director. And then when Peter was called to Prince of Peace in Princeton Junction, the church had this house that they weren't doing anything with. And I'm feeling this call to do, how can we do ministry at this church in a new way for people who are hungry, for people who don't necessarily feel comfortable walking through the sanctuary doors, but might walk in to the door of a house to start getting fed. And so that's what brought us to Prince of Peace and the house next door, which we've been calling it an experiment, but now that ministry has been going on for 10 years, so I don't think we can call it an experiment anymore. We had over 500 people participating in programs last year. And originally it was meant to be a mission field, like, you know, West Windsor is a very diverse community. And so we're like, okay, we're going to bring people to Jesus, you know, who aren't feeling connected yet. And we were a few years in. My calendar's full, the house next door calendar is full. And I look at all the people coming, and guess what? Every single person coming was a church person. Someone who was either a part of the church, very involved in a church, 1 foot in, 1 foot out of the church, or had stepped away from the church. It wasn't the mission field we thought. And at first I thought, what are we doing wrong? You know, this isn't our audience. And then I'm like, wait a minute, the house is full, our schedule is full, everything we offer is filling up with participants. And we had this revelation that our ministry was to start with church people. That's who's coming to the house all the time. So this series that we're doing together over these next 5 weeks is really about feeding us, nourishing us, nurturing us. I just read Bishop Michael Curry's book, Love is the Way, which, as you can imagine, the premise of that book is that love is the way, the one and only way. It is the way for the journey of the Christian. It is the way for the journey of life. And he starts his book by saying, everybody has a deep, deep hunger. Every single human being. And guess what he says that hunger is? What do you think he says every human being is hungry for? Value, peace, love. He said the one thing that connects all of us, all of humanity, it doesn't matter your ethnic identity, your religious identity, your gender identity, doesn't matter. Every human being is hungry to love and to be loved. Love is the way. And so we're really gathering for these 5 weeks together to go the way of love and to feed the hunger that is within all of us. A hunger to love and a hunger to be loved. A hunger for a deeper relationship with God, ultimately. And with people. So I'm so excited to be with you for these 5 weeks. I could tell when people were entering the room, we were already shifting things a little bit because I guess it's not how you usually gather. And as you might guess, this is very intentional. These 5 weeks are not me standing at the podium and lecturing to you and teaching you in the typical format. This is more like a mini retreat. anything you experience at the house next door takes place in a circle. We do group direction, we do retreats, we do workshops, and we very intentionally set ourselves up in a circle to create a sense of community and to remind one another that in our time together, we are here to hold each other. It's like we've created this wonderful bowl, and we are here to hold one another, our hungers, our prayers, our So the first thing I want to say is I think it's important because from what Mr. Lindsay tells me, and she asked for this, so if you don't like that this is so different, it's her fault. I think it's important because this is a different way of gathering for you as for adult forum. I want to establish what I do at every retreat and with every group that comes together. And that is we create a covenant with each other of how we're going to be community together. And I'm assuming, you are already a church family, so you have your own culture and way of being together. But because we may do some things that you may have never experienced before, I want to make sure that you feel that this is a safe space for you and a place of grace. So for me, what's important in this setting is that we acknowledge that you are invited to come as you are, which is really how you're invited to show up every Sunday morning. I don't know if we always feel that way. You're invited to come to this space as you are, which means whatever you're bringing with you when you got up this morning, right? If you've had a terrible week and you're really struggling and you came today for strength, we welcome you. If you came, this was a great week, and you have so much to be thankful for, and you're coming with a grateful heart, we welcome you. Show up however you feel. And the important thing about that is I never make people do anything they don't want to do, because I hate when I'm on a retreat and they tell me to do something that I don't want to do. So just so you know, anything we do, you don't have to do. This is your time, your space. This is for you to be fed in a way that means something to you. So if we're sharing, and you really have something to say and you want to share, please do, because this experience will be richer for your presence in it. But if you go, you know what, I'm really just here today, I don't want to talk to anybody, I'm just here to let whatever the gifts of the Spirit are wash over me, then you don't have to say a word. And you can pass, or you can just sit quietly, but just know, come as you are. Bring what you feel will feed you the most. And, and part of that is acknowledging that we are of value, and our value is just in our showing up, right? You being here. I mean, take a look around the circle, and everybody who's here, just your presence is a gift, and just your presence adds to what our experience is over these weeks together. So come as you be. Another part of the covenant is it's a no judgment zone. Right? So we don't judge one another, which I've never had anybody judge somebody else in a retreat, but I hear people judge themselves all the time. They start their sentences by apologizing for what they're about to say or belittling their experience, so no judging of ourselves. And the other thing is, which you take for granted, but I think it's important to say, is that what happens in the circle stays in the circle. And so if someone shares a story, that is that person's story to share. So you can't at coffee hour next week go, oh, I have to tell you, what Joan said last night. It was such a powerful story. That's Joan's story, right? So we don't share one another's. Anything else that would be important to you in terms of how we are in this space? And again, we're going to do some things that you may not have done before, so you participate as however you see fit. I'm so excited to be here with you for the season of Lent. When Lindsay reached out to me, she asked, what would I be willing to share with the work that I'm doing now at the house next door. And we decided Lent was the perfect time for this series of catching our breath. Let me just start by asking kind of where you are in terms of Lent. What does it mean to you? There's no wrong answer here, whether kind of theologically what it means to you, or memories of Lent, or practices in Lent that are important to you. What is Lent for you? If you were to ask my two girls, their answer would be Lent is soup supper. Because that, growing up, has been their favorite part of church. They love Lenten soup suppers because it's a time when they feel like church is family. It's a time when they walk in the door and they totally leave me and Peter and they go sit with other people and they feel part of a community. So for Lent, for them, I don't know that that's the seminary answer for what Lent is, but I'm okay with that. For my kids, Lent is very much an intentional time of being together in community with church. If you can even say something like soup supper, and that's your answer. What is Lent for you?
Reflection.
Reflection, absolutely.
It helps me focus on my devotionals, be more devoted to my devotionals. I do it daily, but sometimes it's just brief. I just see more intent during Lent.
Yeah, it's a time of focusing on our devotionals, and even maybe it's something we might do all year long. But when you go, 40 days, I can do that, right? There's something about saying there's a beginning and end to the season that you go, I can be intentional, such an important word for the season. It's a time to intentionally be focused, to intentionally reflect. Anything else about that?
Lent always falls, obviously, at the end of this dark season, so Lent always feels kind of dreary to me.
Yes. There's a heaviness to Lent, right? Absolutely there is. And for good reason. I mean, it comes at a rather dreary time of year, right? But it's also, we talk about Lent a lot as a journey, right? And what is that journey? It's from ashes. I mean, can't get more dreary than that, right? We start with ashes and we move to Easter. And where is that journey heading us? To the cross, right? It's a journey from ashes to Easter. It's a journey to the cross. And let's go one more step. It's a journey to the cross in the empty tomb, right? So we don't end in the dreariness, but there's this movement of these 40 days, right? That focus us, that help to focus us. And even though in the life of faith, the life of a Christian, we are always on that journey of faith, right? We are death and resurrection people. There's something about this season that focuses us, right? That focuses us on a different way. And one of the things I love about the seasons of the church here is they really reflect our lives, right? If you think about it. Haven't you been through seasons of Advent, right? Seasons when you've been waiting. Haven't you been through seasons of Good Fridays that maybe lasted more than 3 days, right? When you've experienced a death of any form, right? Have you experienced Easter? Oh my gosh, I pray that you have, right? The season of new life, of hope, of new beginnings. So Lent, there is a heaviness and a dreariness to Lent because we're headed to the cross, right? And we're focused inward, right? This is one of the seasons where, as Christians, we know following Jesus is always about an invitation to turn outward, right? Life is to be lived for the sake of the other. Life is to be about our neighbor. Well, Lent is the season where we have permission to turn inward, right? Because we need to be fed. If I'm going to feed my neighbor, I need to be fed, right? Like that battery, right? If I'm going to give my energy to others, I need to be recharged. And that's the gift of every Sunday morning, in a sense, right? But it's also a gift of the season of Lent. We have permission to turn inward. St. Paul talks about rekindling the gift of faith that is within us. This is the season for rekindling, or we're going to use the language of breathing and catching our breath. Lent, when we talked about,
I was just going to add, build on what Anne said, all the things you mentioned, we experienced in the community Wednesday night, and the Wednesday was such a good service for us, and I was glad to be able to be giving that. You can see all the people that I hadn't seen in a while, people I see all the time, and when you actually dispense things, they can actually be able to actually really return. Do we realize how dark that can be without Jesus, right? And while I think there's a lot of movement focused during this time, we can also be missionaries during this time, whether we're sacrificing and why do you do that? What's the season of sacrifice?
oh, absolutely. Well, and even in Ash Wednesday, which is such a reminder of our mortality and our humanity, we don't just get a mark of ashes, right? Those ashes are very intentionally made upon our foreheads in the shape of a cross, right? Reminding us of our baptism. So even in the heaviness of acknowledging our mortality, we're remembering that we're resurrection people, that we're Easter people. And so that's the journey. We don't gather in Lent without knowing the end of the story, thank God, right? We know Easter's coming. We know that promise of new life is there. So Lent, as we talked about, kind of what this season feels like, Lent actually means spring. So spring is what? It's a time of renewal. It's a time of new birth. And so everything we're doing in Lent is kind of preparing us and helping us to be renewed. As I said, we talked about that journey from the cross to the empty tomb. We use the number 40, right? A very important number in the scriptures. 40 suggests a sense of completeness. So we think of Noah, right? 40 days of the flood. We think of Jesus in the wilderness being tested. We think of the people of Israel wandering in the desert, right, for 40 years. There's a sense of completeness in those 40 days. And as we've already suggested, it's a time where we are invited to be intentional. We use the language of spiritual discipline. I don't know if that was part of your language. I'm guessing it was on Ash Wednesday. Right? You're invited into the discipline of Lent. And if we think of the scriptures from Wednesday, the Gospels talk to us about engaging in those disciplines of fasting, of praying, of giving alms. As someone already suggested, how do we live the discipline of Lent? Well, maybe you've decided you're going to take something on for these 40 days as Jesus took on the cross. Or maybe you're going to give something up for these 40 days as Jesus gave up his life. If you want to give up chocolate, okay. But what's important about the giving up of chocolate is your intention behind it. It's not just about, I'm just not going to eat chocolate for 40 days. It's like, what is that about? What is that not eating chocolate about? And then what does that mean when I see a piece of chocolate, right? How it's about the intention behind it. It's not just giving up or let's just pick something. It's like, no, what's your motivation? What's your intention about that? And Lent is all about the language we've been using, intention, focus, centering. And so for these 5 weeks together, we are going to be very intentional about centering ourselves and experiencing the practices of Lent, specifically through the gift of breath. For me, the season of Lent is an invitation to pause, to stop, to take a breath. It's an opportunity to catch our breath. And while you and I need to do that all the time, right? That's an ongoing invitation for all of us. Not just because our lives are busy, but because I think that commandment about Sabbath, right? It's not just even an invitation or a suggestion, it is the command to honor the Sabbath, which is an invitation, a command for holy rest, to rest in God. And again, the gift of the church of naming these 40 days to rest, to stop, to pause, to catch our breath. And so we're going to spend these 5 weeks together being intentional about turning and about centering ourselves. Why? So that we can deepen our relationship and maybe fill that. And I think there's something, hopefully my prayer is that just this hour together is going to be meaningful for you. And if this is what you do for Lent, you go, you know what, I'm committing to Sunday mornings from 9:45 to 10:45. I'm going to rest an hour a week. That's enough. That is enough. And I think there's tremendous power in doing that in community. I love to be on retreat in any way, shape, or form with others. There's a place to go by myself. There's a place for you to take quiet time each day this week to be by yourself. There's gift in that. But I also think there's power in experiencing these practices together in community. We just notice things differently. I went on my first silent retreat about 10 years ago. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so awkward. I don't really do silence much. I'm a preacher, I have a lot to say. And we were silent from Vespers through lunch the next day. And, it took a little kind of settling into that, right? Because what do? We interact with another person in the room, right? And they want to interact with you. But I have to say, it was probably one of the most powerful breakfasts I've ever had. Because, if you're having breakfast with folks, right, you're paying attention to the person across from you and next to you, and the conversations kind of break here, right? And you're really not paying attention to anybody else. But the dining hall was full of people being silent. And I was aware of every person in the room. You just notice things, and we're paying attention differently, being silent. And so I think that's part of the experience of this time together, is doing some things together in community and being aware, I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in this. Which, obviously we're not. So for me, this time together all begins with breath. And I think that's pretty appropriate and actually pretty scripturally based, right? We're going to spend some time in the scriptures next week, but if we go right back to the creation story, right? How does life begin for you and I? When God breathes into that lump of dust, right? Breathes into that dust, God's breath. And all of a sudden there's, and life begins with breath, literally. We think of Jesus meeting in the upper room with the disciples, right? They're grieving, they're mourning, he's just been crucified. There's a sense in which they're experiencing death. And what happens? Jesus comes into the room, immediately senses their grief, their fear, their anxiety, and what does he do? He breathes on them the gift of life, the gift of new life, in a different way than what we understand in Genesis. But it still is new life. Still is the gift of life. So it all begins with, I don't know if many of you have done physical therapy recently. I've done physical therapy a lot throughout my life, and more recently in the last couple of years for different body parts. And one thing has struck me, Sarah. I don't know if this is your experience or not, but I've been to 2 different physical therapists for different things. And both of them started the sessions by talking about breath. It's like this whole new philosophy of physical therapy, that they don't just start with, the broken shoulder or the bad back. Both of them said, one of the things we're finding is we have to start with your breath, because we're all not breathing correctly. We do it naturally, but we don't do it right. And so they spent a ton of time teaching me how to breathe differently and breathe correctly to strengthen my core in a different way, right, than we do when we're physically exercising. But I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what the invitation of God is, right, in the Spirit, to begin everything with our breath, to strengthen our life in the Spirit. And so that's what we're going to do. Today we're specifically going to be all about breath, but really each of our weeks together is going to be about that. So we're going to be intentional about centering ourselves. And the way that we're going to do this is each Sunday in Lent, I'm going to teach you and share with you about a different spiritual practice. These are some of the great gifts of the church. I don't know how it is in the Presbyterian Church, but growing up in the Lutheran Church, I never heard about these practices. Going to seminary, I never learned about these practices. And they're as ancient as the church mothers and church fathers. These have always been tools of the church. But for many of our churches and denominations, they've kind of been lost along the way. And we're seeing kind of this new energy, this new life, bringing these spiritual practices back to the center, right? You and I are in our rituals, worship on Sunday mornings, and this is just kind of adding to that wonderful, wonderful treasure chest of rituals that the church has for us to make use of. So, as I said, my prayer is that just doing them here together will be a gift to you, and maybe this is all you do till next Sunday. Let's start at 5. Or you might go, that really spoke to me. I'm going to try that this week. Right? So I'm going to set aside 5 minutes and do that, or 10 minutes. Or you catch yourself having an unexpected 5 or 10 minutes and go, you know what? Oh, let me go back to it. Questions, comments, before we step into the first spiritual practice that we're going to do? About Lent or hunger or anything that I've said thus far.
Lent has always seemed like such a dark time to me. Until I came here. Family here is encompassing, and they help lift you through the dark times.
Oh, that's such a gift. It's such a gift. I appreciate it. It is a dark time, and but we walk through like the dark times of life, right? We walk through them knowing there's light on the other side, right? The death is not the final story. We don't end the church year in Lent. We end with Easter, right? We know the rest of the story. And sometimes we need community to remind us of that, right? It's community that helps us catch our breath, that helps us see the light when we can't. Well, the spiritual practice we're going to do today is we're going to do a breath prayer. And I think what we're going to do to start, just to kind of shift gears from me talking, is I'm going to lead you in a chant. Do you, Spirit of the Living God? Yeah, that's on that hashtag. So if you don't, just listen, and you can join in as you feel comfortable. And if you do, I mean, the gift of a chant is a prayer. It's a spiritual practice that helps to focus us. And the gift of chants is you don't have to know the words perfectly. You don't have to hit the right notes. It's not a hymn. We're not a choir, right? We're here. The whole purpose of it is to center us and focus us. So we're just kind of deep in this space, if you will, instead of me, chatting at you. We're just going to turn inward, and we're going to let the words of the chant just center us and focus us. And so I invite you to sit in a way that you're comfortable, but we're talking spiritual practice of sitting with a posture of attentiveness, which means like you're expecting something to happen. You're expecting Jesus to show up in this moment, okay? And so for me, it's helpful. I kind of improve my posture when I'm doing that. And I like to be aware of my feet, on the ground, firmly planted. Sometimes if I'm feeling very scattered and not grounded, I'll take my hands and I'll put my palms face down on my thighs. And even when you do that, you can feel it already grounds you a little bit more, right? It connects you to the earth a little more. Or if I'm feeling pretty grounded, I find my prayer most days tends to be a prayer for openness. Like, God, just let me be open to you, to this hour, to this community. So I'll put my hands up, which is a reminder to me to be open. I really don't think God cares how we sit or what we do with our hands, right? Prayer is not for God. Prayer is for us. So all of this is for me, to remind me, you are grounded. You're grounded in the one who's created you. Be open to the Spirit because she is going to show up. So just a reminder to me. It's helpful for me to close my eyes. If that's not helpful for you, we have an altar in the center. The purpose of the altar, right, is to just give us something to focus on. It's another way to ground us. So for these 5 weeks, I'm talking about something that is not speaking to me. Instead of wandering off to your grocery list or what you're going to do this week, then turn your attention to the candle and think about Jesus the light. Turn your attention to the flowers. Think about the one who created you. Think about Lent, the color purple, the color of the one who is the king, right? So any of this, right, is a resource for you to help you focus. So we're going to sing Spirit of the Living God, and join in if you want, and if you don't, that's fine. Sometimes I find, I don't know if you've ever done this in worship, but sometimes it's so easy for parts of the service to become rote for us, like the Lord's Prayer, right? We do it every week. We've done it our whole lives. Sometimes I love not to say it out loud, and I just listen to the people around me. Because everybody has a different inflection in their voice. And so sometimes I just don't say anything, just listen. And that I kind of get rejuvenated in what that prayer means versus like, I've done this 1,000 times, but I hear it differently. And it becomes a spiritual practice, right? Instead of just making my way through the liturgy, I'm being intentional and I'm listening. So same with this chant. If you want to sing, go right ahead. If you just want to listen and let the word wash over you, that's fine. Whatever is meaningful for you. If we sing off key, that's totally fine. I don't think God cares. Join in as you feel comfortable, and we're just going to sing it till it feels right to stop. And we're listening for each other, not to hear who's on pitch or not. We're listening to go, oh, I'm praying in community. And Jesus is showing up in this space, in this circle. And we're just going to sing it till it feels like it's time to stop. And then I'm going to lead you in a breath prayer, which is our practice for today. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. I want you to bring your attention to your body, to your feet that are firmly planted on the earth, to be reminded how grounded you indeed are, connected to the earth and connected to the one who has created all things, you included. I want you to move your focus to your hands. What would be most helpful? Is it helpful having your palms down, resting on your thighs, getting a little more grounded, a little more focused, a little more centered? Or are you feeling pretty connected? And so you flip your palms up in a gesture of openness to whatever it is that God has in store for you in this time together. And then I invite you to turn your attention to your breath. Just breathing naturally, pay attention to your lungs filling up, and your lungs letting go or releasing. It is such a gift of the Hebrew language that the word for breath and spirit are one and the same. And so we think of breath, and we can immediately think of spirit. We breathe in the breath of life, And as we do so, we're breathing in the gift of spirit. As we breathe out that gift for the sake of the world, that gift of life, so too do we breathe out for the sake of the world the gift of spirit. So without forcing anything, just breathe in and breathe out, aware of the rhythm of your life, the rhythm of breath, the rhythm of spirit. Today is the first Sunday of Lent. And as you breathe in, I'm wondering what it is that you need for your Lenten journey. What do you desire? What do you want? What are you hungry for when it comes to your life? When it comes to your life in the Spirit, when it comes to your relationship with God? Answer that question anyway, just for yourself. What do you need for these 40 days? What do you desire? What do you hunger for? Name that hunger, that desire, just for you and God. And then every time you breathe in, I want you to breathe that in. And if you're looking for light in this dark season, breathe in the light. You're feeling a need for community, breathe in community. You're looking for answers in a time of discernment, breathe in answers. Whatever it is that you need, breathe that in with every breath. Now I'm wondering what it is that you need to let go of in order to be present to God throughout this Lenten season. Even if it's just in this hour together, or maybe it is for these 40 days. What might get in the way? What's a stumbling block to you breathing for these 40 days? To you following the journey to the cross? To you deepening your relationship with God? What's getting in the way? What's not serving you well? Name that for yourself and for God. And every time you breathe out, breathe that out. Breathe out that which is not serving you. You can sit and do this for 10 or 20 minutes, but we're going to do it for 2 minutes. I'm just going to invite you to breathe in what you need this Lenten season. Breathe out what you don't. Or if that's not speaking to you, breathe in the language of our chant. Spirit of the living God, fill me as you breathe in. Spirit of the living God, use me as you breathe out. Let's just take 2 minutes to do that, and I will bring our silence to a close with a prayer. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. Melt us, mold us, fill us, use us. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. Amen. Just such a tease. I usually do this for like a full weekend, so like an hour, such a tease. Your response, anything you want to share about the breath prayer? If you've done it before, if you've never done it before, as I said, 2 minutes is such a tease, but any sense of what that was like that you'd like to share?
I always have trouble staying focused. And it does help to have your physical breath to focus on rather than even a thought or a desire. I find that when I do you breathe more fully as soon as you do that. The rest of your life.
And that's like how we're wired, right? Those who teach spiritual practice talk about we all have what they call monkey brains. We're constantly hopping from one thing to the next. It's what it is to be human, right? We can't turn off the thoughts. And the whole point of spiritual practice is, and one of the main spiritual practices is what we call centering prayer. It's using something like breath to just call you back, call you back, call you back. So if you sit for 10 minutes, you sit for 20 minutes, you sit for 2 minutes, nobody's mind stays there. Nobody can do that. It's impossible for how we're wired. And that's why we practice. That's why it's called spiritual practice, right? We practice it. We're never perfect at it, but it gives us something, right? A word, a breath, a light, something that when my mind wanders, my breath calls me back. My mind wanders, a word calls me back. My mind wanders, the candle calls me. Right? And the brilliance of God to give us a breath, a prayer that we have with us all the time. You and I can be anywhere, and we can be doing this prayer. We can intentionally sit 10 minutes apart with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and be still. We can be standing in the line frustrated, waiting our turn, or we can breathe. We can be mad in traffic, or we can breathe. Right? This is always an option for us. We can be mad at our kids, we can breathe. Right? Some things are easier than others, but there's always the invitation to just stop, pause. And one of the reasons that we suggest that we do it, like for this time on a Sunday morning, when you start your day with it, is if you do the practice regularly, it literally becomes a part of you. So I've never been good at like breathing before I yell at my children. So that for me is still a learned behavior. But the more I breathe on my own, then I'm more apt to remember to breathe when I'm in those anxious situations, angry situations, whatever it happens. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do in our last couple of minutes together. So one, I made a little journal for you. This is for you to use if you so desire. You can write in it when we're together on Sundays and bring it back. You can use it during the week. You can write your reflections, what you've learned. You can totally ignore it, save it for later in the year. It's just a place for you to write down what you're experiencing as we do these spiritual practices together. The other thing I want to invite you to do is take your small note card. We'll use the large note card next week. I want you to think about as we step into Lent together, what is your intention for these 40 days? What's your intention? And you may be able to name it now, and maybe you need to go home and think about it. But I want you to just think about, what do you need for these 40 days? It's kind of like our breath prayer. What are you hungry for? How do you need to catch your breath? The important thing about an intention is that you set yourself up for success. Do not, unless you're a really disciplined person, don't write down, I'm going to sit still for 20 minutes every day. Right? Because what happens as soon as you, by Tuesday, you're not doing it, then you're going to feel bad about yourself. And that's not the point, right? You are loved, right? You are beloved. That's not the point. Maybe you set yourself up and you go, I'm going to come to adult forum every Sunday. Like, I'm going to give it 1 hour a week. like that's enough, right? That's enough. Or maybe you have a devotional book you wanted to tune into and you just haven't been able to stay with it. I'm gonna try to read my devotion every day. So just pick one thing that will help you wherever it is that you're feeling. If you need a pen, I've got one. Make sure. What I'm going to invite you to do is write your intention in your journal, and then I want you to write it on your card, and you're going to just put it face down on. It's your offering for today. Right? Put it face down. The rest of us don't need to see it. But this is your offering for that. This is my intention for what I want to do in these 40 days. So one in your journal so you can look at it each day, but then one that you're offering us. Anybody do? Okay. As you feel so moved, you're welcome to put your offering up. The circle and the gift of this community is even though we don't know what each other's intentions are, we don't know what's written on the cards, God does. And we promise to hold each other's intentions forward. So anyone in this room, if you want to talk about this during the week with someone else, right? If you don't have to just keep it to yourself, but know that you can come to each other and talk about it. Without any shame, I will do a little publicity and just say if you're interested in any of the offerings in the house next door. I have a sign-up sheet. We're about to start for the first time our first newsletter. So if you'd like the newsletter to hear what our offerings are, I've got a couple of flyers. And then I also have this white sheet is just 2 different ways to step into breath prayer. They're just guided, like I guided you through it. These are 2 different guides. You don't need a guide, it's just do it. You and the Spirit can figure it out. But these are just some language things like that. Any closing comments before I end our time together with the blessing?
Interested in or more up to the Spirit.
Holy sheep. Well, in the Old Testament, the the language for wisdom, which is equated with the Holy Spirit, is a feminine image for God. And it's the one part of the Trinity that we get. But, I mean, we tend to talk, often the Creator is referred to as Father. Jesus is obviously Jesus, but it's granted in Scripture that, look at the Old Testament, look at the wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is always connected with spirit and always described in the so. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being willing to perhaps step out of your comfort zone to try maybe something new. And again, if this is where it's left for today, I know God will be working through all of us. But if there's something about our day that you want to use throughout the week, I hope it will bless the rest of your week as well. This is the blessing that I'd like to send you off with from Jan Richardson. She is a Methodist pastor who has a wonderful blog. She's an artist. She writes beautiful blessings and prayers. I'll always, whatever I use when we're together, I'll always have copies of anything I use in case you want to take it home as a resource. But I did not make copies of this, so I'll have them for you next week. This is called When We Breathe Together. Actually, her blessing for Pentecost. This is the blessing we cannot speak by ourselves. This is the blessing we cannot summon by our own devices, cannot shape to our own purposes, cannot bend to our own will. This is the blessing that comes when we leave behind our aloneness, when we gather together, when we turn toward one another. This is the blessing that blazes among us when we speak the words strange to our ears, when we finally listen into the chaos, and when we breathe together. Everybody have a blessed week.
Thank you.
See you next week. Come on back.
I mean,
Yeah.